So there have been countless circumstances where people murder people for various reasons, some for money, some for fame, and some for even attention. But the story I'm about to tell you is just out of this world. On the fateful day of August 28, 1989, Billie Coble kidnapped his estranged wife, but after letting her go, his wife immediately reported to the police and he was arrested, but was released on bail on the same day. But little did his wife know that what was coming was worse. But before you get into the video, if you like this kind of strange documentary style video, please consider subscribing because I'll be uploading every week. So without further ado, let's get into the video. In 1989, Billie Coble was 40 and had a son. He had been married to his son's mother but ultimately got a divorce. He went on to meet this beautiful lady called Ryan Candy, but that also didn't work out and they got a divorce. And so that became his second divorce, but he was able to cope with it and he was fine. He loved his son so much that he occasionally took him to sports events and he was doing pretty well. Also, seeing his son gave him a sense of happiness and purpose because all his previous marriages didn't work out. Coble worked in a drive-thru movie theater and he was fine. A couple of years later in 1988, after 5 years of divorce, he stumbled upon this stunningly beautiful woman she had never met in his entire life. And so he said, you know what, I'm just going straight to talk to this woman. So he went straight and had a little conversation with the woman. And after a little conversation, the woman said, I'm Karen Vicker and I stay in this neighborhood and I'm single. And so Coble said, great, I'm also single. Karen had 3 children from his previous marriage, but Coble said, you know what, that's fine. I'm just going to take care of them like my own children. And Coble also said, I also have 1 son from my previous marriage, which is Gordon Coble. And so from that point, the two of them just madly fell in love with each other and everything was just great. After their marriage, Coble moved in to stay with Karen and his children in her house and Coble's son Gordon, and everything was great, everything was completely fine. But after a couple of months into their marriage, Coble's attitude started to change a bit. He started being aggressive and also getting angry about things that weren't that provocative. He would occasionally shout at Karen's kid and the kids didn't even understand what was going on. And so Karen, who was worried and surprised about Coble's sudden personality change after a couple of months into their marriage, was just not getting it. Because the man he had married as Billie Coble was just acting strange. And not only that, Karen also noticed that Billie has started showing interest in young girls, which got him very worried because he had 3 children who also lived in the same house with them. Also, seeing Coble acting strange and not only that, showing interest in young girls just scared him so much. But she said, you know what, maybe he's just going through a hard time and he's not willing to discuss with me. So maybe he'll be fine. Yeah, let me just give him a couple of days and he'll be fine. But it just got worse. Coble's interest in young girls became very stronger and his aggressiveness towards his children and her herself became very unbearable. And she even saw photographs of young girls in the room they stayed in. But when she asked Coble, he just says, you know, I like sports and I like young girls who play sports, so that shouldn't be a problem. And sometimes even when she asked Coble, she would just get angry and just walk away from her. So Karen, who was just worried about the sudden personality change and attitude of Coble's, just said, this is clearly not the man I got married to. Yeah, this is not the man I got married to. And I have to do something about it, not to protect myself alone, but also my kids. It just didn't make sense because a couple of months ago, everything was fine. And then suddenly, his behavior has changed drastically. But you have to remember that whilst all this tension was going on between Coble and Karen, nobody knew. And this was a little bit strange because his parents stayed just a couple of steps away from their home and his brother also stayed just a couple of walks from where they lived. And so not telling them about all this situation and tension going on seemed a little bit strange. She didn't inform them about Coble's sudden attitude change, his interest in young girls, and his aggressiveness towards his kids. She didn't. She did not tell his parents or even his brother, despite them living very close to them. But a few days later, she told her husband Coble that, you know what, you're gonna have to leave because I just don't get it. I just don't understand why you have suddenly changed. I just don't get it. And so Coble said, you know what, maybe I just have to give you a little space so that we can figure things out. So she said, okay, you know what, let's just give ourselves a little bit space and maybe we'll be able to figure things out. So he left to stay with his sister, Ola. But a few days went by and Coble just started becoming sad. He started feeling this intense grief because he was really crazy about Karen. And the idea of leaving her didn't just make any sense to him at all. And so Coble, who didn't know what to really do about this situation because Karen was really mad at her, started stalking her. He started following her to places without her knowing and also peeping into her window. Karen at this point had no idea that Coble was stalking her, but she was just not interested in him anymore. And so she said, you know what, I'm just going to file for a divorce because clearly this is not the man I got married to. And so a couple of days later, Karen filed for a divorce. And after a few days later, when Coble realized that Karen had filed a divorce, it just breaks him and he just became very sad and depressed. On the evening of August 20th, 1989, Karen went out to a bar with his friends to have some fun and also have some drinks. And so after partying and having some drinks, Karen said, you know what, I'm very tired and I have to go home. So Karen went out from the bar, walked straight to his car and hopped in and started driving. But as he was heading home, she heard a cracking noise at the back of his seat. And so she just kind of turned her head a bit to look at the back seat to see what was really going on. But to her surprise, Coble just popped out from the trunk through the back seat. So it turns out that whilst Karen was in the bar having fun with his friends, Coble sneaked into his car and stayed in his trunk, all this while waiting for her to drive. And so Karen suddenly became surprised and terrified. Coble held a knife at Karen's ribs and said, keep driving. Karen, who was at this point very terrified and worried and didn't know what to do, just kept on driving. And so she drove until they got to a nearby field and Coble asked her to stop. And so she did so, she stopped. Karen at this point started begging for her life and Coble looked at her and said, if I can't have you, nobody can. But Karen just kept on begging for her life and Coble didn't care. He didn't care. He pulled out a roll of black electric tape and at this point Karen knew that this was not going on well. And so she kept begging for her life and pleading for Coble to stop. But ultimately, she was able to convince Coble that she's going to reconsider his decision to divorce him. Coble looked at her and said, okay, I'm just going to let you go. You just have to reconsider things. Coble placed the tape back in his pocket and kind of withdrew the knife from her and said, you have to reconsider your decision. And told her, I'm very sorry for pointing the knife at you. And she let her go. So she drove straight to the house and Coble also went home back to his sister's place. But as soon as she got home, she called her brother, Bobby. Bobby was a police officer and also the brother who lived close to her just a couple of walks away. She explained the situation and how Coble threatened him with a knife and Bobby immediately said, you gotta report this to the police. Karen went straight to the police station at the same day and reported the situation to the police. Officer James Head went to Ola's place where Coble was staying and arrested him for kidnapping. According to him, while driving Coble to the police station after his arrest, he kind of stared at him with this angry look while sitting at the back seat of the patrol car. And this made him a little bit nervous and according to him, made the hair at the back of his neck kind of stand up. And so Officer James thought he heard Coble say something like they are going to regret what they've done. After sending him to the police station, he immediately called Bobby and told him, hey, this guy could be very dangerous and so you guys should stay away from him. Bobby said, okay, I'll tell Karen immediately. After Coble was released on bail for the kidnap charge, Bobby became worried about his sister and Bobby went to the pet shop and bought this huge dog and gifted it to Karen in order to protect herself from Coble. He saw Karen and he saw the dog and he said, oh, I see you've got a dog now. That's a big mean dog you got there. And he kind of played with the dog a little bit and left. After he left, Karen also went back into the house. But something happened. Shortly after Coble left, Karen came back and saw the dog had been killed. The dog was lying dead in front of the house. And so looking at the dog lying dead in front of the house, he knew that there was only one person who could have done this. And this is Coble, of course. But since he didn't see him kill the dog, she said, you know what, maybe it's not him. And so she just let it go. Coble's depression started growing bigger and bigger. And for the first time, Coble started talking about the Vietnam War he had come back from, which he had never done before. He had never talked about the Vietnam War after he came back from the war. He also started talking about killing himself, which made Ola a little bit worried and concerned, and she was afraid that Coble might harm himself. 9 days after the kidnap, Coble called Karen's father and said, "Hi Mr. Vicar, I have a Mustang I've been working on for a couple of days now and I want to give it to you." Mr. Vicar laughed and said, "Oh, you have a car you want to give it to me? We are going to get the car and we are going to get you too." And he laughed and hung up the phone. Also, Coble's sister, Ola, recalled that Coble started throwing his prized possessions into the dumpster and also stopped eating and suddenly started talking about a dog he had lost years back. And so Ola became afraid because clearly Coble could harm himself at any point in time. She was just really afraid. That early afternoon, Coble sneaked into Karen's house and searched the house a bit, but found out nobody was there. Karen had gone to work that morning and the kids were also in school. And so Coble went straight to Karen's room, opened the door and kind of stood there a bit looking for a hiding place to hide. And he found one. He went straight to Karen's closet, opened the closet, paved way through the clothing, and then entered the closet and closed the door and waited. And sure enough, after a few hours, he heard noise coming from the outside of the house. And it turns out that Karen's kids had just returned from school. And he said, "Great." He opened the door of the closet very gently and walked quietly to the living room where the kids were. And to the kids' surprise, Coble just appeared from nowhere, holding a gun and pointing it at them. And he said, "Just be quiet and I won't hurt you." And so the kids, who at this point were very terrified and afraid and had no choice, just complied. And the kids were 3 of Karen's kids and their nephew. Coble took a handcuff and then cuffed each of the kids with their hands at their back and took some curtain cords, tied their legs and then tied them to the bed. And so at this point in time, the kids just knew what was going to happen to them next. And remember, these kids couldn't fight to save their lives. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't. They were just kids. Coble just sat down with the gun pointing at the kids and just waited. After about 3 hours, Karen had just closed from work, and so he returned home and she was like, "Anna, Tracy, I'm home." She opened the door and walked inside the room and she was immediately shocked. Coble had a gun pointing at his kids and she didn't know what to do. She was immediately terrified. Coble just turned and pointed the gun at her and said, "Come inside and close the door." Karen just ran to her kids who were tightened up and checked if everything was okay with them and started begging Coble for mercy. She said, "Please, you can have everything. You can have everything in this house. Please, I'm begging you, just let my kids go. Please, just let my kids go." And so still pointing the gun at her, Coble said, "Okay, I will let your kid go only if you agree to come with me." Karen, who at this point was devastated and didn't know what to do, just said, "Please, I'll come with you, but don't hurt my kids. I'm begging you, please don't hurt them." And so Coble grabbed Karen at her back with a gun pointing at her head and marched her straight outside the door to his car, opened the front passenger seat, handcuffed her and threw her into the car and slammed the door. He then quickly hopped into the car and looked at Karen's face and said, "You are never going to see your kids again." He stepped on the gas and he started driving. As Coble got on the road, he was driving so fast that a police officer tried stopping him, but he didn't stop. He just kept speeding. And so right away, the officer knew that something was wrong. Something was really wrong. And so the police officer hopped in his car and then started chasing Coble. He chased him and he tried stopping him, but still he kept driving. He just kept driving very fast. The officer later discovered that someone had been kidnapped in the car, and of course that was Karen. And so immediately he called for backup. And so before long, there was a fleet of police cars chasing him, but still he didn't stop. He just kept driving. Coble at this point knew that there was no way you could escape from this police chase. So he just steered the car and crashed into a nearby car which was parked on a field in an attempt to kill himself and also Karen. The two survived with just minor injuries, so Coble was handcuffed and rushed to the hospital with Karen. But as Coble was in the hospital, he said something, and what he said ultimately broke everyone in the room. What he said was so terrible and horrifying that even the doctors couldn't stand it, and so they immediately call the police. And so without hesitation, the police quickly ran to the location where Coble was talking about. And this is how the sequence of events he was talking about went. After 9 days of being bailed from the kidnap of Karen, Coble sneaked into Karen's house, waited for the kids to return and then handcuffed them. He then waited for Karen to return from work, but as he was waiting, he got this sudden urge to do something. And so he left the kids and their cousin in the house and then walked straight to Karen's parents' house, which was just a couple of walks across the street away from where Karen was staying. As he opened the door right away, he saw Karen's father, Robert Vicker, and so without hesitation, he just pulled out his gun and then shot and killed him. He then covered the body with blankets and towels. After that, Karen's mother, Zelda Vicker, had just returned from town and heard these gunshots. Coble went straight to the garage door and opened it. Zelda knew immediately that her husband had been attacked, but before he could even take a step, Coble pulled out his gun and shot and killed her too. But it didn't end there. He left the body in the garage and walked straight to Karen's brother's house, Bobby Vicker. As soon as Bobby saw Coble, he knew that he was coming for him because he saw him across the street carrying a gun and walking straight to him. Bobby started running to the garage for his gun, but Coble again pulled out his gun and shot him in the back. Coble got closer to Bobby, but despite being shot at the back, Bobby managed to struggle a little bit with Coble, and so he stood up and started running to the garage in hopes that he could get his gun and then fight back, but it didn't work. He didn't make it. Coble just pulled out his gun again and then shot him straight to his neck, and then right then he just fell on the ground and died. And so as Coble was saying all these things, everybody was just shocked, but he was just smiling as if nothing had happened, and he didn't even show any sign of remorse. After he recovered from his injuries, Billie Coble faced trial and he was convicted for capital murder of 3 people, Bobby Vicker, Zelda Vicker and Robert Vicker. On August 29, 1989, he was then sentenced to death in 1990 without the possibility of parole. He had a retrial for sentencing in 2008, but he was again sentenced to death. He was executed via lethal injection on 28 February 2019 and was pronounced dead at exactly 6:13 p.m. at the age of 70. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it so much. And if you like this kind of scary, spooky documentary style video, please feel free to subscribe because I'll be uploading every week. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. See you in the next one.